know I was about to meet the man who would destroy my life when I stepped out of my apartment that evening. My mother's words were still ringing in my ears, sharp, final, like a door slamming shut with my name on the other side of it. She'd called to inform me, not discuss, that I was officially being disowned. Financially, legally, completely. We paid for the best doctors, she'd said, the best specialists, and you still can't give us what we want, a grandchild, a biological grandchild. Something my body had already told me would never happen. 3 years I'd known about my infertility. 3 years of failed treatments and medical procedures, and the slow, crushing realization that I'd never be a mother. And when I'd finally told my parents, still holding out hope they might understand, they'd looked at me like I'd deliberately murdered their future. So I walked. Downtown Miami after dark. No destination, just movement. I needed distance from 4 walls that suddenly felt like a tomb. The rain was warm and heavy, the kind that makes the city smell like wet concrete and possibility. I wanted to be drenched. I wanted to feel something besides the numbness that had been my constant companion for weeks. I was thinking about how pathetic it was that a 28-year-old woman could feel this completely invisible when I stepped off the curb. I never saw the car coming. I felt hands first, strong, sudden, around my waist. A pull backward with enough force to knock the breath from my lungs. The car swerved past, so close I heard the squeal of wet tires. The driver honked, angry at something that wasn't even his fault. And then I was pressed against a stranger's chest, both of us gasping. "Are you okay?" His voice was low, urgent, filtered through an accent I couldn't quite place. His arms were still around me, and I was too stunned to move. I turned to look at him. Tall, early 40s maybe, dark eyes that seemed to catalog me in a single glance, sharp features, the kind that suggested he'd seen things that aged a person from the inside out. His dark hair was plastered to his face from the rain, and there was something about him that felt ancient, dangerous, like a predator that had learned to move through the world wearing a human shape. He was looking at me like I mattered, like a stranger's life was worth saving. Yes, I'm okay, I managed. You stepped right in front of it, he said, not accusatory, just fact. You weren't even looking. I wasn't paying attention. The admission felt dangerous. He didn't let me go, and I realized I was trembling, whether from cold or proximity to death, or from the intensity of his gaze. I couldn't tell. "Come on," he said. "Let's get you out of the rain." A restaurant appeared upscale, warm. Exactly what a woman who'd just nearly died might need. He guided me inside with a hand on the small of my back. A hostess started to turn us away, then saw something in his expression, and immediately found us a private table in the back. He ordered whiskey for both of us without asking. "For shock," he said when I hesitated. "Trust me." I drank it in one burning swallow and felt the world settle slightly. Warm, real, alive. "Thank you," I said. The phrase felt inadequate for what he'd done. "It would have been messy for the paramedics," he replied, the faintest smile touching his mouth. "Hard to explain," I laughed, a small, surprised sound. The first real laugh I'd made in weeks. He studied me with those dark eyes, and I felt like he was seeing all of me, not just the soaking woman in front of him, but every broken piece underneath. "Bad day?" he asked. "Bad 2 years," I corrected, then immediately regretted the honesty. But he didn't flinch. He just nodded like he understood something about darkness that most people never learned. "I know the feeling," he said quietly. 2 hours later, I told him things I'd never told anyone. About my parents and their disappointment. About my infertility without quite saying the word. About feeling like I'd failed at the one thing that was supposed to be natural. He just listened. When the restaurant staff started hovering with the check, he pulled out his phone. "Give me your number," he said. "I need to know you made it through this night." Every rational instinct told me no, but I was lonely, and he was the first person in years who'd looked at me like I was worth saving. I gave him my number. "Diego," he said when I asked his name. "Diego Santos." "Maya Chen," I replied, when he walked me to my apartment building. He kissed my forehead, just my forehead, never my lips, and said goodnight. I went to sleep thinking I'd never see him again. I was catastrophically wrong. Diego called 3 days later. I checked my phone obsessively in those 3 days. Not because I expected him to. I'd already accepted the rainy street as a beautiful aberration, a moment of grace in an otherwise terrible life. But because I hoped he would, because a man like that, composed, beautiful, genuinely concerned about a stranger, seemed too perfect to be real. When his name appeared on my screen, my heart stopped. "Hi," I said, trying to sound casual and hearing the desperation underneath. "I'm glad you answered," Diego said. "I thought you might not." "I almost didn't," I admitted. "But you did. Are you okay? Since the street." I lied about seeing a therapist, unsure why I felt the need to prove I wasn't still suicidal. He sounded genuinely relieved. "Would you have dinner with me?" he asked. "Somewhere drier than a rainy street." I said yes, before I could overthink it. He picked me up at 7 in a sleek black Mercedes. When I opened my door, he looked at me like I'd surprised him, like he'd been half convinced I'd changed my mind. "You're beautiful," he said simply. No one had called me beautiful since my diagnosis. Not since my body had become an enemy. The restaurant he chose was impossibly expensive. The staff treated us with a mixture of deference and fear, seating us immediately at the best table. Wine appeared without being ordered. "How often do you come here?" I asked, studying the menu without prices. "Not often," Diego said, "but they know me." The way he said it suggested layers I didn't understand. We talked for hours. He asked about my job in art curation and actually listened. He asked about my childhood, my dreams, the things I loved about Miami. He was careful around any mention of my family or my infertility, like he understood they were live wires. In return, he offered very little about himself: import and export, real estate, legitimate sounding things that required no real explanation. He lived in Miami. He appreciated beautiful things. He was looking at me when he said that last part. "Can I see you again?" he asked as we left. "Yes," I said immediately. I didn't know I was saying yes to everything, to him, to darkness, to a life that would unravel and remake me entirely. Over the next month, he became the architecture of my days. He'd call in the evenings, sometimes for dinner, sometimes for coffee. Sometimes he'd simply arrive at my door with that patient, waiting expression that made it impossible to send him away. He was nothing like the men I'd known before, artists and musicians and gallery assistants, who lived in the same precarious world I did. Diego was older, established, armored in expensive suits, and controlled silence. He wore confidence like a weapon. I didn't know yet what weapon it actually was. What I knew was that he made me feel visible. When he looked at me, I wasn't the infertile woman her family had discarded. I was just Maya, interesting, worth his time. One night, after we'd been seeing each other for 6 weeks, I mentioned wanting to be a mother. "What would you want to do instead?" he asked, not trying to comfort me with false hope, just asking the question. I hadn't let myself consider that. For 3 years, I'd been so focused on what I couldn't do that I'd never imagined what I might do if I accepted the inability. "I don't know," I admitted. "Then we'll figure it out," Diego said, and he meant it. But inconsistencies were beginning to surface. Phone calls that made him tense. He'd take them in another room, his voice suddenly all business, a completely different person from the man who held my hand across restaurant tables. Injuries, he explained away. A bruised knuckle from gym training. A cut on his shoulder from falling while hiking. Cash. Always large amounts of cash, which seemed wrong for someone in legitimate business. Associates who met him briefly. Men with cold eyes and permanent scowls. He'd introduce them as business partners and disappear with them, returning different, harder somehow, less present. I noticed. I filed each inconsistency away in a mental folder labeled things that don't add up about Diego, but I didn't investigate them. I didn't ask questions because I was terrified of what the answers might reveal, and more terrified of losing him because of those answers. By 3 months in, I was completely in love with him. I didn't tell him, but I felt it every time he held my hand, every time he listened to me talk about something I cared about, every time he looked at me like I was the only thing in the world that mattered. And I could feel him pulling back, maintaining distance, building walls. He was protecting himself. I would understand much later that he was also protecting me. I found the second phone while looking for his charger. He was asleep beside me, and I'd reached for his nightstand drawer. Instead of a charging cable, I discovered a burner phone. Encrypted, minimal contacts, just lying there underneath documents I was afraid to examine. I put it back exactly as I'd found it. I told myself it meant nothing. Maybe it was for business. Maybe it was something innocent that I didn't need to understand. But it bothered me in a way I couldn't articulate. The cash was worse. I discovered it by accident the same way, looking for something else in his apartment penthouse, opening a drawer I had no business opening, thousands of dollars wrapped in neat bundles, more money than made sense for someone with legitimate income. My stomach dropped. Then Diego emerged from the shower, beautiful and present, and he smiled at me, and I pushed the question down like I'd been trained to do. By 4 months in, I was actively ignoring evidence. One night, he got a phone call that lasted 45 minutes. I could hear his voice from the other room, completely transformed. Hard, cold, commanding. "Handle it," I heard him say. "Whatever it takes." When he came back to bed, I asked what the call was about. "Business," he said. "Nothing for you to worry about." "But you sounded—" I stopped, unsure how to describe what I'd heard. "Sounded what?" He pulled me close. "Dangerous," I whispered. For just a moment, I saw something in his eyes that terrified me. Something ancient and cold and completely capable of terrible things. Then he kissed my forehead. "You're tired. Go to sleep." I did, because questioning him felt more dangerous than not knowing. He carried a gun sometimes. I glimpsed the holster under his jacket once, and when I asked about it, he mentioned security concerns and changed the subject so smoothly I forgot why I'd asked. His associates met him with a tension that suggested they weren't discussing normal business. He was different after these meetings. Harder, more distant, like he'd been in a world parallel to the one we shared, and he couldn't quite bring the two together, and I was falling deeper in love with him, while becoming increasingly certain that he was involved in something I didn't want to understand. At 4 months, he took me to a sophisticated dinner party at an exclusive private restaurant. The men there were his, maybe 15 of them, all wearing expensive suits, all carrying themselves with that same cold competence I'd learned to recognize. He kept me close all evening, his hand on my back, his arm around my waist, staking a claim, showing something to everyone in that room. One of the men mentioned the operation coming through next week. Diego's look could have cut glass. Another asked if I understood what Diego did for a living. I said yes, even though I didn't, and Diego's grip on my waist tightened. By the time we left, I was both deeply uncomfortable and intensely aroused. A confusing combination that scared me. In the car, I said, "Your friends seemed intense." "They're not my friends," Diego said, eyes on the road. "They're colleagues, from import and export." I didn't bother hiding my skepticism. He glanced at me. Yes, it was the most obviously false thing he'd ever said to me. "You kept watching me tonight," I said instead of pushing. "Like you were checking that I was still there, because I wanted to make sure you were still there," he said simply. "These men, they notice beautiful women. I don't want them noticing you. Were you afraid I'd like them better than you?" I tried to make it a joke. "No," his voice was completely serious. "I was afraid they'd realize how much you mean to me, and they'd use that against me." It was the first time he'd explicitly acknowledged that I meant something to him, and it terrified me, because if I mattered to him, then he was right. I was a liability. By 4 months, I couldn't ignore the contradictions anymore. I followed him, not out of rational planning, but out of necessity. I needed to know. I needed to understand who the man I loved actually was. The first time, he drove to a warehouse on the outskirts of Miami. I parked a block away and watched him emerge, but I also noticed something I'd somehow missed before: men in parked cars nearby. Watching. Waiting. He was never truly alone with me, but I'd been too wrapped up in the romance of it all to understand what that meant. He was inside the warehouse for 30 minutes. When he emerged, he was different. Colder, more rigid. The gentleness he carried with me was completely absent. I followed him to another location, a nightclub in an expensive neighborhood. He entered through the back. When he came out, he wasn't alone. There was a man with him who looked like he'd been crying or beaten. Diego's hand was on the man's shoulder, and while his expression was blank, there was something about his posture that screamed violence, controlled, intentional, practiced. I felt sick. I went home and didn't answer when Diego called. He came to my apartment anyway. "What's wrong?" he asked immediately, reading something in my face. "Where were you today?" My voice shook. "I told you I had business to handle. You went to a warehouse, a nightclub. You met with a man who looked like he'd been beaten." Diego closed his eyes for just a moment. When he opened them again, he looked exhausted. "Maya, who are you?" I asked. Actually, he didn't answer. He just held my gaze, and I could see him calculating, deciding. "Finally, I'm someone who's not good for you. Someone you should stop seeing immediately." "That's not an answer. It's the only one you're going to get," he said quietly. "I deserve better than that," I said. "I deserve the truth." He looked at me for a long moment. Then he said, "If I tell you the truth, you'll be in danger. Real danger. The kind that doesn't go away. I've been trying to protect you from this, Maya. I've been trying to keep you safe." "From what?" I whispered. He didn't answer. He just held me, and I could feel how much it cost him to hold me without explaining, to keep me in this terrible space between knowing and not knowing. "I'm going to follow you," I said finally. "If you won't tell me, I'll follow you until I understand." "Don't," he said fiercely. "Don't do that. Then tell me." He was quiet for so long that I thought he wouldn't answer. But finally, "Give me a few more days. Let me figure out how to protect you. And then I'll tell you everything." I should have demanded the truth right then. Should have broken up with him and never looked back. But I was already too far gone, so I said okay. And I lied. I went back to following him. I became systematic about it. I followed him to warehouse meetings, to private clubs, to locations I didn't have names for. I watched him conduct business that made no conventional sense, but had all the hallmarks of something deeply illegal. I did research online late into the night. I found DEA reports mentioning Diego Santos. I saw photographs of him with known cartel figures. My hands shook as I read. I watched surveillance footage from a news report showing him at a scene with armed men, coordinating something with hand gestures and nods. I felt like I was going to throw up. I went into his apartment. He'd given me a key weeks ago, and I looked for evidence. I found a locked safe. I found documents I didn't understand. I found photographs of him with dangerous men in locations outside Miami. And then I found his encrypted phone again. This time, I spent hours trying to crack the passcode. I tried everything. My birthday finally worked. The phone opened, and inside, I found messages that made everything crystal clear. Territory secured, shipment delayed, target eliminated. He wasn't in import and export. He was a cartel boss, a murderer, the kind of dangerous that goes beyond imagination. I sat on his bed, holding his phone, and I cried. Not for long, but enough to break something open inside me. I put the phone back exactly where I'd found it. Then I waited for him to come home. It was past midnight when he arrived. He saw me sitting on his couch in the dark, and I watched his face shift through concern, confusion, then fear. "What's wrong?" he asked immediately. "Who are you?" I asked quietly. He froze. "I know," I continued. "I followed you. I researched you. I found your phone. I know what you do." He didn't deny it. He didn't try to lie. He just closed his eyes and sat down on the far end of the couch. "I told you not to follow me," he said finally. "You also lied to me repeatedly," I said. "So your credibility is shot. I was trying to keep you safe. By lying to me. By letting me fall in love with someone I didn't actually know." "Yes," he said. "That's exactly what I was doing." The honesty of it shocked me silent. He looked at me, and his expression was so devastated that I forgot to be angry. "I'm sorry," he said. "I'm so sorry, Maya. I saw you on that street, and you were broken. And I recognized that brokenness in myself, and I wanted to be the person who could fix you. But I can't fix you. I can only destroy you. So what do you want me to do?" I asked. "Do you want me to leave? Do you want this to be over?" "I want you to leave," he said. "I want you to go and find someone normal and have a normal life. I want you to forget about me." "I can't do that," I said. "You can, and you should." "I don't want to," I said. And then, because I was terrified, and the truth was the only weapon I had, my parents disowned me. They cut me off completely. Do you know why? Because I can't have children. My body doesn't work the way it's supposed to. I'm infertile, and my family decided that made me broken. He was looking at me with an expression I couldn't read. "You're the first person who made me feel like I wasn't broken," I continued. "You're the first person who looked at me and didn't see something wrong. And now you want me to just walk away because you're a criminal. Because of what you do. Yes, he said, because you deserve better than this. Let me decide what I deserve, I said. And I'm deciding that I deserve to know the truth. I'm deciding that I deserve to love you, even if you're a cartel boss. I'm deciding that being with you, being in danger with you, is better than being safe and alone. He stood up and walked to the window, his shoulders tense. If you stay, he said finally, his voice barely audible, everything changes. You become part of this. You become a target. You become complicit in things that would make most people sick. I understand, I said. Do you? He turned to face me. Do you really understand what that means? Do you understand that people die because of me? That families are destroyed? That I'm responsible for suffering on a scale that you can't comprehend? I understand that you saved my life, I said. I understand that you've been kind to me. I understand that you've shown me more love than anyone in my actual family ever did. And yes, I understand that you're dangerous, but I'm not leaving. He looked at me for a long moment, then he walked toward me, pulled me into his arms, and held me like I was the only thing keeping him tethered to the earth. I'm going to lose you, he said into my hair. One way or another, this is going to destroy us. Maybe, I said, but not tonight. That night, we made love knowing the truth about who we were. It was more intense than anything I'd ever experienced, not because it was gentle, but because it was honest. We were two broken people choosing each other anyway, and I crossed a line that I could never uncross. The next morning, Diego stopped hiding. He showed me his operation, not all at once. He introduced me to it, the way someone introduces a visitor to a foreign country where they don't speak the language. Carefully, methodically. He took me to a meeting with his top lieutenants, hard men with cold eyes who looked at me with suspicion. When Diego introduced me as someone who would be part of the operation, something shifted. She knows, one of them asked. She knows, Diego confirmed. And she's staying. There was a moment of acknowledgement among the men. I was no longer an outsider. Over the next few weeks, I began to understand the complexity of what Diego ran. It wasn't just one thing. It was a network, drug trafficking, money laundering, protection rackets, legitimate businesses that served as fronts. It was vast and intricate and required someone with a mind for strategy to manage it. Diego explained operations to me in detail. He showed me distribution networks and territory maps. He explained supply chains and partnerships with other cartels. And I understood it. All of it. You should have gone to business school, Diego said one night, reviewing an operation I'd helped restructure. I went to art school, I replied. But the logic is the same. You need systems, efficient resource allocation, contingency plans. He looked at me with something like awe. You're good at this, he said. I'm good at solving problems, I corrected. The problem just happens to be more complicated than what I'm used to. He pulled me close. I'm going to lose you to this world, he said. You're going to become addicted to the power. Maybe, I said, but I'll love you more. 3 months after discovering who Diego really was, I officially moved into his penthouse. I quit my job at the gallery. I didn't need the money. Diego provided everything, and I'd never wanted for anything in my life. But more than that, I didn't have time for a normal job anymore. I was fully integrated into his operation. I attended strategy meetings. I managed partnerships with other organizations. I helped coordinate shipments and operations. I became indispensable to his empire in ways I'd never imagined. I was good at it, better than good. I had a mind for logistics and strategy that surprised even me. I could see patterns and inefficiencies that others missed. I could negotiate with people who would have intimidated me a year ago. Diego watched my transformation with an expression that mixed pride and heartbreak. "You're beautiful when you're thinking about a problem," he told me one night. "You're beautiful when you're not threatening people," I replied. He laughed. He was laughing more now since I'd joined his world. He was more relaxed, less burdened by the weight of secrets. His associates respected me, not as a girlfriend or a charity case, but as someone who could think strategically and execute operations. They would come to me with problems, and I would solve them. One of his oldest lieutenants, a man named Miguel, who'd been with Diego for 20 years, said something that stuck with me. "You're the better half of his mind. You make him think in ways he wouldn't otherwise." "He makes me feel alive in ways nothing else does," I replied. "Yes," Miguel said. "That's why this will never end well. Love like that, it's too powerful. It consumes everything." But I didn't believe him. I believed that Diego and I were different. I believed that our love could survive anything. I was wrong about survival, but I wasn't wrong about the power. By 6 months in, I knew almost everything about Diego's operation, but there was one thing he still wouldn't tell me. Every month, at the same time, he would make a phone call. It would last for hours, and he would go into his private office, lock the door, and take it in complete privacy. I asked him about it once, and he told me it was nothing I needed to worry about. "Everything else is my business," I said. "Why not this?" "Because this one thing is mine," he said quietly. "I can't tell you, not yet." I let it go. I didn't follow him. I didn't try to discover the secret. I just accepted that there were still parts of him that were closed to me. And that was fine. I could live with that, because everything else, the violence, the criminality, the darkness, I'd accepted. I'd embraced it. I was becoming someone new, someone powerful, someone who could stand next to a cartel boss and not be his weakness, but his strength. My parents still didn't know I existed. The life I'd had before had completely disappeared. The gallery, my friends, the attempts to have a normal life, all of it was gone. But I didn't miss it. I was too alive in this new world to miss the old one. One night, I was in Diego's office working on a supply chain issue when a sharp pain shot through my lower abdomen. I gasped, doubling over, and Diego was immediately at my side. "What's wrong?" he demanded. "I don't know," I said. "Cramps, I think." He helped me to the bathroom, and I understood what was happening. My period, my body doing what it did every month, reminding me that there was something it couldn't do. I sat on the bathroom floor, and I cried. Not from pain, but from the reminder, even in this new life, even with all the power and the danger and the love, my body was still broken. Diego sat down next to me on the tile floor, not caring about his expensive suit. "What's wrong?" he asked again, more gently this time. "Nothing," I said. "Just a reminder that my body doesn't work right." He pulled me close to him. "Your body is perfect," he said. "Every part of you is perfect. Except the part that can't make children," I said bitterly. He went very still. "That's why you were on that street," he said slowly. "That night when you almost got hit by the car. You were running from your parents. Because of that." I nodded, unable to speak. "And that's why your family disowned you," he continued. "Because of this." "Yes." He pulled me into his lap, and he held me. And I could feel the weight of something shifting between us. like he was understanding something about me, about us, that he hadn't understood before. "We should talk about this," he said finally. "There's nothing to talk about," I said. "It is what it is." "Maya, I'm fine," I said, and I meant it. Or I was becoming someone who could mean it. Someone who didn't need to be a mother to have a purpose. Someone who could find meaning in other things, like power, like love, like the life we were building together in the darkness. After that night, things shifted between us in subtle ways. Diego became even more integrated with me in his operation. He started bringing me into higher level decisions. He started asking my opinion on major moves. He started treating me like a strategic equal. But I noticed he was also watching me more closely, taking inventory of my moods, my reactions, my emotional state. One night, about a week after the bathroom conversation, I brought up the monthly phone call. "Tell me about the call," I said as we lay in bed together. "The one you make every month." He tensed. "I told you. I know it's yours. It's private. But Diego, I'm part of your world now. I'm part of your organization. If there's something you're keeping from me, something that important, then I need to know." He was quiet for so long that I thought he wouldn't answer. Finally, he said, "There's a woman. She's important to me. I check on her once a month to make sure she's okay." My stomach dropped. "A woman," I said carefully. "Not like that," he said quickly, seeing my face. "It's complicated. She was important to me before I met you. She's still important, but it's not romantic." "Then what is it?" I asked. "It's family," he said, and something in his voice told me that was the closest he could come to the truth. I let it go, not because I wasn't curious, but because I understood that there were parts of Diego that would always be close to me, and I was learning to accept that. The first time I witnessed Diego commit violence, I thought I would be horrified. I was wrong. One of his business partners, someone he'd trusted for years, was suspected of being a mole, an informant for the DEA, someone who'd been feeding information to federal agents. Diego invited him to a private meeting at one of his properties. I was there, and I watched. The man came in confident, unaware. Diego greeted him cordially, offered him a drink. They talked for a few minutes about nothing important. Then Diego said, "You've been talking to the feds." The man's face went white. "I'm not sure what you mean." Diego's security moved in. They restrained the man, secured him to a chair. I watched as Diego asked him questions, with the same calm he used when discussing business strategies. The man broke within minutes. He confessed everything. He'd been working with the DEA for 6 months. He'd been passing information about operations, about routes, about people. He was sobbing by the end, and I was not horrified. I was fascinated. I watched as Diego explained what would happen. The man would disappear. His family would be taken care of financially, on one condition. They never said anything. They never looked for him. They accepted that he was gone. It was cruel. It was violent. It was the kind of thing that should have made me sick. But I was watching Diego work, and I was watching his intelligence in action. I was watching him solve a problem with perfect calculation and no wasted emotion. I was watching someone I loved be completely and totally dangerous, and I was aroused by it. That scared me more than anything else could have. After it was done, after the man was removed, after the room was cleaned, Diego found me. "You're upset," he said. "No," I said, "I'm not." "Then what are you?" "I don't know," I admitted. "Afraid of what I'm becoming. Afraid of how attracted I am to the darkness in you." He pulled me close. You're not becoming anything, he said. You're just revealing who you've always been. And you were always drawn to darkness, Maya. You just found me before you found anything else. He was probably right. By month 9, I was unrecognizable from the lonely woman who'd been disowned. I was making decisions that affected hundreds of people. I was managing territories, coordinating operations, negotiating with rival organizations. I was doing all of this while dressed in expensive clothes and surrounded by men who feared me. Diego had promoted me. Officially, I was his second in command. Everyone in the organization knew it. Everyone answered to me when Diego wasn't available. I had power, real power, the kind that came from being smart and ruthless and willing to do what needed to be done. One night, I made a decision that impressed even Diego. A rival operation was trying to move into our territory. The easy solution was violence, war, bloodshed. Instead, I proposed infiltration. I suggested we plant someone inside their organization, someone who could extract information, destabilize them from within, make them destroy themselves without us ever being directly involved. Diego listened to my entire plan. Then he said, "Do it." It took 3 months, but it worked perfectly. The rival organization imploded. They turned on each other. By the time the dust settled, they were no longer a threat, and we'd barely lost anyone. Miguel came to me after and said, "You're brilliant. Brutal, but brilliant." "I'm strategic," I corrected. "Yes," he said, "and that's more dangerous than just being brutal." I wore that like a badge of honor. Diego was watching my transformation with something between pride and fear. I could see it in his eyes. He was seeing me become something dangerous, something that could survive in his world, not just as his girlfriend, but as his equal, and he loved me for it. And he was terrified of what I was becoming. One night, he said to me, "I'm losing you." "What do you mean?" I asked. "I mean, I'm watching you become someone else, someone harder, someone who belongs to this world in a way that I'm not sure anyone should." "Isn't that what you wanted?" I asked. "For me to be strong, to survive here." "I wanted you to survive," he said, "but I didn't want you to lose yourself in the process." "I'm not losing myself," I said. "I'm finding myself. For the first time in my life, I know exactly who I am. I'm powerful. I'm smart. I'm capable. My body might not be able to do what my family wanted, but my mind can do anything." He pulled me close and held me. "I know," he said. "That's why I love you. And that's why I'm afraid." At 3 months in, I coordinated my first major operation. It was a shipment from Colombia. Hundreds of kilos, millions of dollars. It was high risk and high reward, and Diego trusted me to oversee it completely. I planned every detail. I scheduled the route. I coordinated with corrupt officials who would look the other way. I managed the logistics and the personnel and the contingency plans. And when it arrived, when the shipment made it to Miami safely, I felt an overwhelming sense of accomplishment. I wasn't just complicit in Diego's operation anymore. I was essential to it. The organization threw a celebration, a private dinner in one of Diego's nightclubs, closed to the public. His top people, their wives or girlfriends, his business partners, they toasted to me, to the Queen, as they started calling me. Diego sat next to me, his hand on my back, and he watched me receive their praise with something like resignation. Later, alone in our penthouse, he said, "You enjoy this?" "Yes," I said, not bothering to deny it. "You enjoy the power." "I do. Is that a problem?" He was quiet for a long moment. "No," he said finally. "It's not a problem. It's just a fact I have to accept. You're not the broken woman I found on the rainy street. You're someone else entirely. I'm still her, I said. I'm just more than her now. I know, he said. That's what scares me. After 3 months of successfully running operations, Diego finally gave me access to the encrypted phone. I want you to see the communications, he said. I want you to understand the scope of what we're dealing with. The phone showed years of messages, years of operations and decisions, and the careful management of a criminal empire that stretched across multiple states. But it also showed something else. There was a woman, a name that appeared in the messages. Alejandra. Who is she? I asked. Someone from my past, Diego said. Someone who matters to me. She's had a hard life. I take care of her. I check on her. That's what the monthly calls are about. Is she? I started. She's not a threat to us, Diego said. She never will be. I just needed you to understand that there are people I'm responsible for who exist outside of our world. And I accepted that. Not because I wasn't curious, but because I understood that Diego had a capacity for loyalty that extended beyond me. And that was something I could respect. It happened on a Tuesday night, 6 months into my integration. We were lying in bed, and Diego was tracing patterns on my skin with his fingertips. I want to make you official, he said. What do you mean? I asked. I mean, I want to marry you. Not in a church, not legally, but officially, in front of my organization. So everyone understands that you're mine and I'm yours, and that you're my equal in every way. I was quiet for a moment, processing. Are you asking me to marry you? I asked. Yes, he said simply. The answer is yes, I said. He kissed me, and I could feel the weight of what he was offering, not just a marriage, but a complete integration into his world. A public declaration that I was his partner in everything. A week later, he brought me a ring. It was made from a seized diamond, a stone that had been taken from a rival cartel years ago. It was beautiful and dark, and it was made from violence and seized power. It was perfect. I'm marrying you, he said when he put it on my finger. In every way that matters. I'm marrying you too, I replied, and I meant it with every fiber of my being. We stood in front of Miguel and the other organization leaders, and Diego made an announcement. Maya is now my wife, he said. In every sense that matters. Everyone here understands what that means. There was a moment of acknowledgement. I was now officially his equal. No ceremony. No witnesses other than the organization. No fanfare beyond what this moment represented. We had become bound to each other in the only way that mattered in this world. By month 12, I was complete. I had fully transformed from a lonely, broken woman into a queen of an empire. I was feared and respected. I was brilliant. I was dangerous. I was no longer thinking about the things I couldn't do. I was too busy doing things I never thought I could. Diego watched my transformation with a kind of awe, but also with a growing distance. He was still in love with me, but he was also slightly afraid of me. And I was okay with that, because I'd learned that fear and respect were the same thing. Miguel had warned me months ago. Love like that, it's too powerful. It consumes everything. He was right. Our love had consumed everything, our lives, our morality, our sense of who we were. But we'd built something beautiful from the ashes. We'd built an empire. We'd built a partnership that was based on complete honesty and complete commitment. And we were unstoppable. One night, as we lay in bed, Diego said, "We need to talk about the future." "What do you mean?" I asked. "I mean, we need to talk about what we want. What we're building this empire for, who we're building it for. I went very still. Are you asking me about children? I said. I'm asking you about legacy, he replied. What do you want our legacy to be? I didn't have an answer. Not immediately. For months, I'd been so focused on the present, on the power and the danger and the love, that I hadn't thought about the future. I hadn't thought about what would happen when we were older. What would happen if something took Diego away from me? What the empire would become without us to lead it? I don't know, I admitted. Then we'll figure it out together, he said, because whatever we decide as equals. That night, I laid awake thinking about infertility, about the way my body had failed me, about how I'd let that failure define me for so long. And I realized something. It didn't matter anymore, because I'd found something greater than motherhood. I'd found partnership. I'd found power. I'd found a way to matter in the world that had nothing to do with my ability to conceive. My body was still broken, but I was no longer broken because of it. A few days later, I brought it up directly. We were in his office, reviewing an operation, when I suddenly said, I need to tell you something. Diego looked up from the documents. I'm infertile, I said. I've been infertile for years. My family disowned me because of it. They said I was broken. They said I'd never be good enough because I couldn't give them grandchildren. He set down the document and gave me his full attention. I know about the infertility, he said gently. I've known for a while, since that first night on the bathroom floor. But I haven't told you everything, I continued. I haven't told you that sometimes, even after all of this, even after everything we've built, I still feel ashamed of it. I still feel like there's something wrong with me because my body can't do what it's supposed to do. He came around the desk and pulled me into his arms. There's nothing wrong with you, he said. There's nothing wrong with your body. And if your family couldn't see the incredible woman that you are, then their loss is their failure, not yours. I know that logically, I said. But sometimes my heart doesn't believe it. He held me tighter. Your heart will learn, he said, because I'm going to tell you every single day until you believe it yourself. That night, after we'd talked about my infertility, Diego told me a secret. I'm infertile too, he said. I've known for years. I made peace with it a long time ago. I wasn't shocked, but I was profoundly affected by the honesty of it. When? I asked. About 10 years ago, I discovered there was an issue. I went to a doctor in private. He told me I would never have biological children. I told him it didn't matter. Did it? I asked. At the time, no, he said. I'd built an empire. I'd become powerful. I didn't think I needed anything else. But then I met you, and I realized what I'd been missing. What's that? I asked. Someone who sees me. Someone who accepts me. Someone who I can love without worrying about whether I'm good enough, because she knows exactly what I am, and she chooses me anyway. He pulled me close, and then I discovered you were infertile too. And it felt like the universe was telling me that we were meant to find each other, that we were broken in the same way, and together we were whole. I cried in his arms that night, not from sadness, but from a relief so profound it nearly broke me. I was no longer alone in my brokenness. I was sharing it with someone who understood completely. After we'd both confessed our infertility, everything changed. We stopped thinking about biological children. We stopped worrying about the future in those terms. Instead, we thought about empire, about legacy, about what we would leave behind when we were gone. We could adopt, I suggested once. We could, Diego agreed. But I don't think we want to, not really. Why not? I asked. Because bringing a child into this world into our world would be cruel. They would grow up in danger. They would grow up seeing violence and darkness every day. And I won't do that to a child. I understood what he was saying, and I agreed. Then what's our legacy? I asked. Each other, he said simply. Our love, our partnership, the empire we've built together. The empire that will outlast us, because we've built it to be bigger than just us. And I realized that was enough. More than enough. It was everything. By year 5, we had consolidated our power completely. The rival operations had been eliminated or absorbed. The government agencies that had been investigating us had either been paid off or had given up. The organization was stronger and more efficient than it had ever been, and we were in complete control. I was 24 hours a day, 7 days a week thinking about the operation, planning, strategizing, making decisions that affected thousands of lives. And I loved it. Diego sometimes worried that I was becoming too consumed by it. He'd suggest taking a break, spending time on something other than the empire. But I didn't want to. Because for the first time in my life, I had found something that I was good at, something that mattered, something that gave my life meaning. My body couldn't make children, but it could carry the weight of an empire. And that was enough. 5 years into our relationship, we discovered a betrayal that nearly broke us. One of Diego's oldest associates, a man he'd trusted for more than 20 years, had been working with the federal government. He'd been gathering evidence against us for 2 years. And he'd been gathering evidence on me specifically. The government wanted me as much as they wanted Diego. They wanted to prove that I was a willing participant in the operation, that I wasn't a victim or a hostage, that I was a criminal in my own right. When Diego found out, he was devastated. Not for himself, for me. They're going to come after you, he said. I can protect you from the cartel, but I can't protect you from the government. Then don't, I said. I don't need protection. I know what I've done. I'm not ashamed of it. You should be, he said roughly. You should want out. You should want to be far away from this. I'm not leaving, I said. We started this together. We finish it together. He pulled me close, and I could feel him shaking. I'm going to lose you, he said. One way or another, they're going to take you from me. Maybe, I said, but not today. We had several options. First, we could run, leave the country, abandon the empire, disappear into the world somewhere they couldn't find us. Second, we could fight. Use our resources to discredit the evidence, to turn the government investigation away from us, to make the betrayer disappear so thoroughly that they had nothing to prove. Third, we could surrender. I would accept responsibility. I would take the fall for some of the operations. I would protect Diego and the organization by going to prison for a limited time. We're not doing the third option, Diego said immediately. Then we run, I said. No, he said. We fight. We fight and we win. And we make sure that anyone who betrays us never thinks about it again. I understood what he meant. It took 2 weeks to extract the necessary information from the traitor. It took another week to use that information to discredit him with the federal government. By the end of the month, the government's case had collapsed. The traitor was dead, and the investigation was closed. We'd won, again. But the cost was high. We lost people. We lost territory. We lost money. And more importantly, we lost something intangible. We lost the sense that we were untouchable. We lost the belief that we could survive forever. After the betrayal, something shifted in us. We stopped thinking long-term. We stopped thinking about sustainability. We started thinking about now. We accelerated our operations. We took bigger risks. We pushed into territories we'd been avoiding. We increased our revenue by 300% in a year. It was reckless. It was brilliant. And it was going to end very badly. Diego knew it. I knew it. But we didn't care anymore. Because we'd realized something fundamental. We could never be safe. There would always be threats. There would always be people who wanted to destroy us. There would always be something coming for us. So we decided to live as fully as possible before it came. And we did. After 5 years of being unofficially married, we decided to make it official. Not in a church, not legally, but in a way that mattered to us. We stood in his office, the same office where we'd reviewed countless operations, and we made vows to each other. I promised to stand by him, to love him, to never betray him, to be his partner in everything forever. He promised the same. And then we signed our names to a document that Diego locked away in his safe, a document that declared us married, a document that said we belonged to each other. Miguel was the only witness. Afterward, he congratulated us. And then he said something that I've never forgotten. You two are going to burn this city down, not with violence, with love. You're going to build something so powerful that, when you finally fall, the impact will be felt for generations. I didn't argue with him, because he was right. By year 6, I was completely transformed. I didn't even recognize the woman I'd been before. The disowned woman, the lonely woman, the broken woman. That person was gone. In her place was someone cold, someone calculating, someone capable of making decisions that would destroy hundreds of lives without flinching. And I'd done it. I'd become exactly what I needed to become to survive in Diego's world. The other women in the organization sometimes looked at me with a combination of fear and awe. They understood that I was something different, something dangerous. The men in the organization respected me in a way they'd never respected Diego's ex-girlfriends, because they understood that I wasn't just a woman who'd fallen into this world. I was a woman who'd chosen it and conquered it. And Diego looked at me with a mixture of pride and heartbreak, because he was watching the woman he'd fallen in love with become someone harder, colder, more powerful. But he loved me for it anyway. One night, I asked him, "Do you still love me?" We were lying in bed, and he was tracing patterns on my skin with his fingertips. "More than ever," he said. "Even though I've become this," I asked. "Even though I'm not the broken woman you saved anymore." "Especially because of that," he said. "Because you saved yourself. You took the darkness I gave you, and you refined it. You became something I could never be on my own." He kissed me, and there was such intensity in it that I felt it in my bones. "I love you," he continued. "Not because you're beautiful, not because you're smart, not because you're powerful. I love you because you chose me. You chose this. You chose the darkness, and you chose to thrive in it." I understood in that moment what we really were. We weren't a love story. We were a survival story. We were two broken people who'd found each other and decided to stop trying to be fixed. We decided to stop trying to be normal. We decided to become something new, something dark, something beautiful, something that could only exist in the shadows. 7 years after the rainy street, Diego and I stood in his office looking at a map of Miami. Every major territory on the map was ours. Every major operation was something we'd either started or taken over. We'd built an empire that was worth billions of dollars. We'd built an organization that was feared throughout Florida and beyond. And we'd done it together. What do you think will happen? I asked. When we're gone. I don't know, Diego admitted. Maybe someone else will take over. Maybe the whole thing will fall apart. Maybe that's how it should be. Or maybe, I said, we've built something that transcends us. Something that can survive without us. Is that what you want? He asked. I want us to matter, I said. I want the choices we've made, the risks we've taken, the lives we've touched. I want all of it to mean something. He pulled me close. It does, he said. It will. By year 8, new threats were emerging. The Colombian cartels wanted to expand their reach into Florida. The Mexican cartels wanted our territory. The government was building a new case against us, more carefully this time, with more evidence, and there were rumors of someone coming. Someone powerful. Someone who wanted to take everything we'd built. I was not afraid, because I'd learned that fear was just another emotion to manage, just another variable to control. Diego was more cautious. He'd seen what happened when someone got overconfident. He understood that power could be taken away. But I was confident. I was arrogant. I was certain that we could handle anything that came at us. I was wrong about that, but I didn't know it yet. There was one night when everything was perfect. We were in our penthouse, looking out at Miami. The lights of the city spread out below us like something we'd conquered. Diego was holding me from behind, his arms around me, his chin resting on my shoulder. I would do it all again, I said. Every moment of it, even knowing how this will end. How will it end? He asked. I don't know, I admitted. Badly, probably. But I would still choose this. I would still choose you. He tightened his arms around me. I love you, he said. I love you too, I replied. And in that moment, we were completely and totally happy. Not because our lives were simple or safe or normal, but because we'd chosen each other. We'd chosen the darkness. We'd chosen to be real with each other and to love each other completely. It was the most perfect moment of my life. As the threats mounted, Diego and I became more intertwined. We stopped trying to separate our personal life from our criminal one. They were the same thing now. Our love was inseparable from our empire. When we made love, we were thinking about operations. When we planned operations, we were thinking about love. We were completely consumed by each other and by the world we'd built together. It was addictive. It was all-consuming. It was the definition of dark romance, and I wouldn't change a single moment of it. By year 9, I realized something fundamental. I wasn't transforming anymore. I had already transformed. I was now simply existing as the person I'd become. I was no longer trying to be anything. I wasn't trying to be a good woman or a moral person or someone who deserved happiness. I was just being. And that being was dangerous and powerful and completely amoral. I made decisions without hesitation. I orchestrated violence without guilt. I destroyed people without regret. And Diego loved me for exactly who I'd become. I hadn't thought about my infertility in years, not because I'd gotten over it, but because it had become irrelevant to who I was. I'd built an empire without needing to have biological children. I'd created a legacy that had nothing to do with my body's capabilities, and I'd done it with someone who understood me completely, who accepted me completely, who loved me completely. My parents had disowned me for being infertile. They'd said I was broken, but I'd taken that brokenness and I'd transformed it into power. I'd taken my pain and I'd made it into something that mattered, and I'd never felt more whole. By year 10, there were signs that things were beginning to fall apart. The new threats that had been emerging were getting stronger. The government investigation was getting more sophisticated. And there were cracks forming in the organization as people began to lose faith that we could survive forever. For the first time, Diego and I disagreed about strategy. "We need to pull back," he said. "We've built enough. We should consolidate and hold what we have." "We need to expand," I said. "Show strength. Push forward." "That's how you lose everything," he said. "That's how you become unstoppable," I countered. It was the first real argument we'd had in years, and it showed me something. It showed me that we weren't perfect, that we could disagree, that maybe all of this, the empire, the power, the love, maybe it was all balanced on a knife's edge, and one wrong move would destroy it all. We compromised. Diego pulled back on the highest risk operations. I agreed to consolidate our holdings instead of expanding into new territories. We found a middle ground, and the organization continued to run smoothly. But the disagreement had unsettled something between us. It had revealed that we were not, in fact, of one mind, that we were two separate people with separate agendas. I wasn't sure if that was a problem or just a fact of human relationships. One night, Diego said, "I think we should stop." I looked at him. "Stop what?" "All of it," he said. "The operation, the empire, everything. I think we should walk away while we still can." "No," I said immediately. "Why not?" he asked. "Because I can't imagine my life without this," I said. "Because I've become someone who doesn't know how to be anything else." "That's the problem," Diego said. "You've become too much like me, and if you become too much like me, then you'll end up like me. And I don't want that for you." "It's too late," I said. "I'm already like you. I've been like you for years, and I'm okay with that." He looked at me with such sadness. "I know," he said. "That's why I'm afraid." After that conversation, I had to accept something fundamental about myself. I didn't want out. I didn't want to be saved. I didn't want to be redeemed. I wanted to be exactly what I was. Dark, powerful, dangerous. And I wanted Diego to accept that. It took him a while, but he did. He stopped trying to protect me from the darkness. He stopped worrying about my soul or my morality, or whether I was going to regret the choices I'd made. He just loved me, as I was, all of me, the good and the bad and the unspeakably dark, and I loved him the same way. By year 11, everyone understood what we were. We were a unit. We were a team. We were a power couple in the most literal sense. We ruled the organization together. We made decisions together. We stood together against anyone who tried to challenge us, and we were unstoppable. There were people who feared Diego, but there were people who feared me more, because Diego was brutal, but he was predictable. I was brutal in ways that were unexpected. I was brilliant in ways that people didn't anticipate. Together, we were a force of nature. By year 12, all the threats that had been building suddenly exploded. The Colombian cartels made their move. The government made arrests. And someone new appeared, someone who claimed to have a right to Diego's territory. It was a man named Hector Morales. He was from a rival family, and he'd been building power in the shadows for years. Now he was ready to make his play. Diego understood immediately what he represented. "This is it," Diego said to me. "This is the beginning of the end." "No," I said. "This is the beginning of war, and we're going to win." But I said it with less certainty than I felt, because I understood for the first time that we were not actually invincible, that we were mortal, that eventually everyone loses. The war with Hector Morales lasted months. It wasn't a traditional war. It was a battle of strategy and intelligence and resources. It was violence and negotiation and careful maneuvering. And we were winning. But the cost was high. We lost people. We lost territory. We lost money. And more importantly, we lost something intangible. We lost the sense that we were untouchable. We lost the belief that we could survive forever. By the end of it, we'd won. Hector Morales was dead. His organization was scattered, and we'd maintained our territory. But we were both exhausted. Emotionally, physically, spiritually. And I could see, for the first time, that Diego was aging. That the weight of what he'd built was finally catching up with him. After the war with Morales, Diego and I had a conversation that changed everything. "I don't think I have much time left," he said. "What do you mean?" I asked, even though I understood perfectly. "I mean, the government is building cases. The cartel is destabilizing. And I'm tired, Maya. I'm so tired. So step back," I said. "Let me run it. Let me take over completely." "I'm thinking about it," he said, "but I'm also thinking about something else." "What?" I asked. "I'm thinking about letting it go," he said. "Just letting the whole thing collapse, walking away, disappearing, living a quiet life somewhere where no one knows who we are." And for the first time in 12 years, I didn't have an immediate response. Because I realized that the woman Diego had fallen in love with the woman on the rainy street. That woman would have said yes. That woman would have been relieved to escape, but I wasn't that woman anymore. "I'm not leaving," I said finally. "I know," Diego replied. "I don't want a quiet life," I continued. "I don't want to disappear. I don't want to pretend to be something I'm not." "I know that too," he said. "So what do we do?" I asked. "I don't know," he admitted. "But whatever we decide together." And in that moment, I understood that Diego was giving me a choice. He was saying, "You can leave. You can walk away. You can still have a chance at a different life." But I was choosing not to take it. I was choosing him. I was choosing the empire. I was choosing the darkness. And I was choosing to do it with full knowledge of what that would cost. We stood in front of Miguel and the other organization leaders, and Diego made an announcement. "Maya is taking control of the empire," he said. "Effective immediately. All decisions go through her. All operations are under her command. She is the leader now." Everyone understood what that meant. It meant Diego was stepping back. It meant I was now the most powerful person in the organization. It meant I was the queen of the empire, not just in title, but in practice. And I was ready. As the new leader of the organization, I made decisions that were bold and brilliant and brutal. I streamlined operations. I eliminated redundancy. I increased profit margins. I expanded into new territories. The organization became stronger under my leadership, and everyone knew it. Diego watched from the background, and I could see the pride in his eyes. But I could also see something else. I could see that he was preparing for something, that he was getting his affairs in order, that he was preparing for the end. And I understood, with a clarity that was almost unbearable, what that meant. Year 15. The government made its move. They arrested 3 of our major lieutenants. They seized $30 million in assets. They froze bank accounts and seized properties. And they announced that they were building a case against Diego and me. They wanted both of us. They wanted to prove that we'd run the operation together, that we were equal partners in the criminal enterprise. Diego expected me to panic, but I didn't. I called in favors. I leveraged connections. I used the incredible resources that we'd built over the years, and I made the case disappear. It took 6 months, but in the end, the government had nothing concrete. The case fell apart, and we were safe. For a while. One night, I was alone in Diego's office, technically my office now, looking at the map of Miami that showed all our territories. I thought about the girl who'd been disowned, the girl who'd felt broken, the girl who'd thought she'd never matter. And I realized that girl had become the most powerful person in Miami. She'd built an empire that spanned multiple states. She'd made decisions that affected thousands of lives. Her parents had said she was broken because she couldn't have children. But she'd found a way to create something greater than children. She'd created legacy, power, meaning, and I was proud of that girl. I was proud of who she'd become. Diego and I found a balance in year 15. He was no longer actively involved in the operation, but he was always available for counsel. I was the figurehead, the one making the decisions, the one carrying the weight. But we were still partners. We still made major decisions together. We still loved each other with an intensity that hadn't diminished over time. If anything, our love had deepened. It had become less about passion and more about understanding, less about romance and more about partnership. We were soulmates in the truest sense, not because we were destined to be together, but because we'd chosen each other again and again through years of darkness and danger. One night, Diego suggested we go back. Back where? I asked. To where it started, he said. The rainy street. The place where I saved you. We drove there late at night. It was raining. Of course it was raining. Miami in the rain always felt like a beginning or an ending. We stood on the curb where I'd stepped into the street, where Diego had pulled me back from death. Do you regret it? I asked. Saving me that night. Not for a second, he said. Even knowing everything that's happened, even knowing how this will end, I don't regret it. How will it end? I asked. I don't know, he said, but I know it will end. Everything ends. We stood in the rain, two dangerous people in a dangerous city, and we understood that we were approaching the final chapter of our story. And we were ready, despite everything we'd built, despite all our power and resources. Things began to fall apart. It started slowly. A defection here, a betrayal there, a government agent getting better intel, a rival cartel making moves. By year 16, it was clear that we were on borrowed time. I considered stepping back. I considered walking away. I considered making different choices, but I didn't, because I was no longer the woman who wanted to be saved. I looked in the mirror one day and didn't recognize the woman looking back. Not because she looked different, but because there was nothing left of the girl who'd been disowned. There was nothing left of the woman who'd been lonely. There was nothing left of the person who'd felt broken. In her place was someone completely and totally transformed. Someone who'd accepted the darkness. Someone who'd embraced it. Someone who'd made it part of herself. And I was okay with that. In year 17, I coordinated the largest operation of my career. It was a consolidation move, a way to secure our position against the encroaching threats, a way to prove one final time that we were the most powerful force in Miami. It succeeded brilliantly, and it was also, I realized later, a suicide mission. It drew attention from every government agency. It motivated every rival cartel. It made us a target in ways we'd never been before. I'd done it because I was no longer thinking about survival. I was thinking about legacy. I was thinking about making sure that when we finally fell, we fell in a way that meant something. Diego understood what I'd done. It's brilliant, he said, when the operation was complete. And it's the beginning of the end. I know, I said, and I was at peace with it. In the final year of our time together, Diego and I lived as fully as possible. We didn't plan for the future. We didn't worry about the threats. We just lived. We spent nights talking about our dreams. We made love like we were the only two people in the world. We walked through Miami knowing that our time was limited. And we loved each other with a fierceness that only comes when you know the end is near. One night, Diego said to me, "I'm glad I found you." "You saved me," I said. "No," he said. "You saved yourself. I just gave you the opportunity." We held each other in the darkness. Two broken people who'd found completeness in each other. "Thank you," I said, "for choosing me." "Thank you for choosing me back," he replied. And in that moment, everything was perfect. Not because our lives were safe or simple or normal, but because we'd found each other, we'd chosen each other, we'd loved each other, and nothing that came after could take that away. The empire fell 3 years after my final operation. The government made coordinated arrests across 4 states. The cartel infrastructure collapsed under the weight of the investigation. Our territories were divided among rivals, and Diego and I were arrested. We went to prison not as victims, but as architects of our own downfall. We went knowing exactly what we'd done. We went without regret. We served 10 years. 10 years of being separated. 10 years of knowing that our time together was limited. 10 years of exchanging letters and brief visits, and the understanding that we'd created something that would outlast us. I was released first. Diego followed 2 years later. By then, we were older, worn down by time and imprisonment, and the weight of what we'd built. But we found each other again, and we loved each other again, not with the intensity of before, but with the understanding that came from shared history and shared trauma and shared dreams. We lived quietly in Miami. We ran legitimate businesses. We watched the empire that we'd built slowly fade into legend. The next generation of cartel leaders didn't know our names. The government had moved on to other threats. The city had forgotten us. And that was okay, because we had each other. And that was always enough. On a rainy night, exactly 30 years after the night Diego saved me from the car, we returned to the street where it all began. We were older now. Our hands were weathered. Our faces showed the lines of a life lived in darkness. But we were still together. "Do you ever regret it?" I asked him. "Not for a second," he said, just like he had years before. "Even though it destroyed us?" I asked. "It didn't destroy us," he said. "It transformed us. It made us into something neither of us could have become alone." I thought about the girl I'd been, the woman I'd become, the lives we'd affected, the empire we'd built, the love we'd created. "I'm glad I stepped in front of that car," I said. "I'm glad I was there to save you," he replied. We stood in the rain, holding each other, and we understood that our story wasn't a tragedy. It was a love story, a dark, dangerous, beautiful love story. And we understood something else in that moment. We weren't ending. We were beginning something new. Something that had nothing to do with empires or power or the criminal world we'd left behind. We were beginning the life we'd earned. The life we'd paid for with blood and tears, and the pieces of ourselves we'd given up along the way. We were beginning forever, in whatever form that took. Years later, long after Diego and I had settled into a quiet life, I stood at the overlook that looked down on Miami. The city spread out below me like something I'd conquered, which, in a way, I had, but I'd also surrendered to it. I'd let it remake me. I'd let it burn away everything I was and forge me into something new. Miguel once told me that Diego and I would burn the city down with love. And he was right. We had. But from that fire, something beautiful had emerged. Not the empire, that was dust now, scattered to the wind, but something deeper. Something that survived prison and separation and 30 years of distance. Our love, our partnership, our choice to be exactly what we were, without apology. My parents had disowned me because I couldn't have children. But I'd created something greater than children. I'd created a life with someone who understood me completely. I'd created an empire. I'd created a legacy that would outlast both of us. I'd created meaning. And that, I realized, was more than enough. Diego found me at the Overlook. He'd aged well. The years in the sun had deepened the lines of his face. But he was still the man who'd saved me on a rainy street. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "About how far we've come," I said. "About who we became. About whether we'd do it all again." And he asked. "Yes," I said, without hesitation. "I would choose you. I would choose this. I would choose the darkness and the power and the risk. I would choose all of it again." He pulled me close. "I know," he said. "I'd choose you too." And as the sun set over Miami, I understood something that I'd spent my entire life learning. Infertility had been my wound, but it had also been my gift, because it led me to Diego. It led me to a life I never thought I could have. It led me to power and partnership and a love so fierce and so complete that nothing could touch it. Not my parents' rejection, not the government's investigation, not the rival cartels or the betrayals or the fall of the empire. None of it could touch what we'd built. And standing there with Diego as the sun fell into the ocean, I was finally, completely, wholly at peace.